Hello, we are Team 5, Keyshawn, Jennifer, and Tyler. We chose to identify the similarities between the critical thinkers. We used two trees as symbolism of another similarity that the creative thinkers had in common, which is their deep connection with nature. One tree represents the thinkers' sacrifices, while another tree represents their successes.
Sigmund Freud. He came from a loving and supportive family. He had the love of both of his parents well into his adult years. He married his longtime fiancee and they had 6 children. He had good relationships with his family and he had good relationships with his close friends. But this determination to be creative came with a price. And that price was those relationships. He was away from his family for extended periods of time, and even his friendships, which were professional um, friends of his, those relationships suffered because of professional differences of opinion.
When he was 4 or 5 years old, Einstein was shown a compass by his father, and ever since then, Einstein was hungry for knowledge and self learning. A friend of Einstein's, Max Talmy, gave Einstein books to read that dealt with force and matter. Einstein, growing up, did well in school but disliked it. However, Einstein spent much of his time self learning in school, and he didn't really was fond of the return he was getting from school. He spent much of his time building things and reading. Einstein once said, "I must be willing to give up what I am in order to become what I will be." Einstein was so hungry for knowledge that he sacrificed and shied away from his friends and family in order to focus on his work. This sort of isolationism allowed for his greatest accomplishment, his theory of relativity.
Grant sacrificed relationships with friends and loved ones.
Igor Stravinsky, whose father was an actor, a musician, a lawyer, and a civil servant, expected for Stravinsky to follow in his footsteps and study law. Stravinsky disliked formal education and he was not that fond of studying the law. He had strained relationships with his family and his acquaintances, and through his determination to be creative, those relationships suffered. Despite his dislike for the law, it served him a great deal in his musical career, with most of his professional relationships ending in legal battles.
Right from the start, Picasso had a knack for drawing. He was considered a child prodigy. It was said that his first word was "piz" or lapis for drawing. His father was an artist, but quit once Picasso was better than him. Picasso had rough and haunting memories while growing up: an earthquake that took him away from his home, and the death of his young sister Conchita at age 14. Picasso had promised God that if he saved Conchita, he would quit his art. However, since that was not fulfilled, Picasso felt free to pursue art. Picasso did poorly in school and rather paid more attention to his art. Picasso sacrificed his school as well as his time that lasted for nearly 6 years, but would ultimately lead him to his greatest creation, Cubism.
Gandhi sacrificed time with his family while he lived abroad.
Thomas Stearns Eliot. He came from successful parents and a well-known family. He was well educated and could have easily followed the path destined for someone of his pedigree. However, he chose to chart his own path. He chose to be a writer. And through that, he tried different um, careers and different professions, but never leaving the thing that he loved the most, which was writing. In that path to creativity, he sacrificed. He sacrificed his own happiness. He stayed in an unhappy marriage for many years. Out of these sacrifices, Freud was able to accomplish psychoanalysis, the Oedipal complex, and the dream analysis.
Einstein's greatest accomplishment is his theory of relativity. In the early part of the 20th century, it is one of the most significant scientific advances of our time. The theory of relativity entails the meaning of space and time are altered by the motion of the observer. Einstein ultimately received the Nobel Peace Prize for Physics in 1921 for his work and accomplishments.
Graham succeeded in developing a new dance style, which is known as modern dance in America.
These sacrifices allowed Stravinsky to accomplish the turning point in modern musical composition with The Rite of Spring.
Picasso's ultimate creation, Cubism, revolutionized European painting and sculpture. Picasso, with friend Georges Braque, together worked day and night on month's end, often inseparable, to form the most influential art movement of the 20th century. This paved the way for future art movements and allowed others to use Cubism in their own artworks.
Gandhi succeeded in starting a revolution that freed the Indian people through the development of his movement called Nonviolent Civil Disobedience.
But through that sacrifice, he brought us one of the most influential poetic works, The Wasteland. So, how do I relate to these creative thinkers? Well, they all have sacrificed something to accomplish their goals. So I can relate to them in that sense. I was given an opportunity to enhance my career, but it would have required me to be away from my family for several months. So I sacrificed the time with my family in order to develop and enhance my skills and further advance my career opportunities. So that's how I relate to these creative thinkers.
How do I relate to these critical and creative thinkers? Well, I relate to Gandhi, Graham, Eliot, Stravinsky, Freud, Picasso, and Einstein is because they all had to sacrifice something. They all had to sacrifice something to birth or to get to their greatest accomplishment, and that's what I feel like I'm doing here with pursuing this online master's program with Brunel University. I'm sacrificing my time, money, and relationships in order to get to my greatest accomplishment up to date, which would be to receive my master's in organizational leadership from Brunel University.